While falsha chur rove Gujan Crenny Shaw New. My name is Maura Drum. I will be chairing this event and I would like to welcome you all here today. My mother, who was also called Maura Drum, was murdered by agents of the British state as she lay in a hospital bed on the 28th of October 1976. For many people, my mother's voice was the voice of resistance and the voice of justice, and it was for that reason she was murdered. As her daughter, I am both proud and humbled to have been asked to chair this meeting today. On Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, the British Queen will visit the occupied 6 counties. That visit has presented us with a very unique opportunity to highlight the fact that hundreds of people of all ages met their deaths at the hands of British Crown forces and their agents in Ireland during the course of the present monarch's reign. Many more were injured or endured physical and psychological abuse by those same forces. Prisoners have been tortured and abused. Countless families across Ireland still live with the painful reality of the tragedies, distress and anguish brought to their homes by those forces of which the British monarch is Commander-in-Chief. The unchanged nature of Britain's attitude to the families of those it murdered was highlighted last Monday. New proof in the form of official British government documents revealed how in July 1972 the state officially sanctioned the use of deadly force by its troops against Irish citizens and ensured that those Crown forces would not be prosecuted. Evidence that the 1972 policy still remains a central part of current British policy was demonstrated by the revelation on Wednesday that the British government had rejected a demand by the families of the victims of the Ballymurphy massacre for a public inquiry into those state murders. Those families are all here today and are very welcome. The media, the politicians, the great and the good would prefer us to keep silent about Britain's crimes in Ireland. We refuse to be silenced. Our voices will be heard.
Hello. I stand here as a man who was wounded on Bloody Sunday by the British Armed Forces. I stand here disgusted that so-called Irish Republicans will meet and greet a Queen who 40 years ago decorated the Parachute Regiment with medals of honour for their part in the murder and attempted murder of innocent people on the streets of Derry. Furthermore, 2 years following the Savile inquiry, Dave Cleary, Soldier F, who murdered 4 and wounded 4 on Bloody Sunday and was also involved in the Ballymurphy massacre, retains his medals of honour from Elizabeth Windsor. The Queen's Jubilee and future engagements in Ireland should be treated with disdain. How can Irish Republicans justify and rationalise their engagements with a supporter of murder in Ireland? Thank you.
Thank you. My brother was one of those that was murdered on Bloody Sunday at the barricade, and while my father was trying to help him, British paratrooper decided to shoot him twice. I am here today to give reasons why I believe Martin McGuinness should not meet or greet the Queen of England, and why her Jubilee celebrations in Ireland should be shunned by all. Does Martin forget that the Queen decorated the Parachute Regiment? They remain decorated. Does he forget the role of the Queen's forces in Derry with the murder of innocent civilians and children such as Manus Deary, Annette McGavigan, Daniel Haggerty and many, many more? Martin, can you sleep at night after giving orders to young Irish men and women to attack the Queen's forces when many of these young men, women and teenagers were then murdered? I hope you're happy with your newfound friend Martin, for she is the employer of the men who murdered our loved ones. Your actions in doing this is totally treacherous.
My name is Pierce McGovern from Kinolly in County Fermanagh, an area which is also heavily militarised during the conflict, and the British Army was stationed all along the border in County Fermanagh. Me and my family were directly affected by state murder. My cousin Kevin was murdered in Cookstown in County Tyrone on the 29th of September 1991 when he was just out of the blue shot in the back by an RUC officer. And not alone was he shot, but his body was defiled on the streets of Cookstown for a period of time after that, and his family was abused by telephone and by interviews with RUC officers afterwards. Our family, the McGovern family, never received the truth about what happened to Kevin. To continue our family's quest for truth and justice, I am now a member of Fernia Fermanagh, and we demand truth and justice, not jubilation. Our victims' organisation totally opposes the lauded jubilation, which is now being played out for the British Army's Commander-in-Chief, the British Queen. On behalf of not just the McGovern family, but all the Fernia families, and the wider collective present here today, we at Fernia do not support a jubilation to the British Army's Commander-in-Chief, that same British Queen. Not under any circumstances, especially in the absence of Britain acknowledging its brutal and oppressive role as major protagonists throughout the conflict in Ireland. The lauding and welcoming is premature, to say the least. It is wrong. To this day, the British state continues to block all attempts to establish the truth about its role in the conflict. See what happened to Ballymurphy this week. But we, the people, will continue to demand the truth about British state murder in Ireland. The Queen is decorated, returning warmongers for their crimes in Ireland. Those British Army paratroopers who murdered on Bloody Sunday 1972 in Derry, along with countless other regiments, were decorated with medals in Buckingham Palace. Internationally, our troops continue this murderous campaign in Iraq and Afghanistan, and soon Iran. No doubt she will also reward them with medals of bravery. In conclusion, Fernia are not ashamed to stand here in Belfast with other victims groups and comrades. We will not shirk our responsibilities for the families of British state murder in opposing the Commander-in-Chief of British Armed Forces, Elizabeth Windsor. We are not shaking hands, and we're not going cap in hand for that truth and justice. We demand it. We demand truth and justice, not jubilation.
Just like to say thanks to the people who organised this here for the opportunity to say a few words. Jared and Rory were 22, Jared was 22 and Rory was 18 when they were murdered. Me and the wife were out at our Irish class in Lurgan, 3 miles away. It's a very cruel, one of the most cruelest ways to kill anybody is to actually do it in their home. It's not a message of terrorism there, and it makes it very difficult to see the reason why Martin McGuinness, who I've walked behind this last 20 or 30 years, he can go behind doors and shake the hand dripping with the blood of my children. Another thing I'd like to express here today is the word dignity. I say the F for the word dignity. Too often we have took that road of dignity, and where did it get us? I think it's time that people like yourselves here started talking a bit more frank, on which I'm picking up here today. At long last, people are starting to show a wee bit of anger. And I really hope that it develops into good, dignified hatred for the Queen on the left.
My brother Sam Marshall was murdered on Wednesday, 7th of March 1990. 22 years on from that tragic event, my family are still awaiting the full truth to be told. We know that the British state lied about Sam's murder. We know that a cover-up of state involvement began immediately after the shooting. We know that Sam and his two friends were subject of an intense British military operation on the night of the murder. 9 undercover British soldiers were involved, using 6 unmarked cars. The operation was initiated by Special Branch. We are convinced that members of British state forces, including British military intelligence and the Special Branch, were directly involved in the planning and commission of his murder. Responsibility for Sam's murder rests with those who armed, directed and controlled the killers. The blame rests with the policymakers in the NIO, the politicians in Whitehall and Downing Street, the Special Branch, MI5 and British military intelligence. We should not have to remind ourselves time and time again the British state and its forces organised and directed death squads. We have already been fighting for truth for the past 22 years. We are prepared to fight for another 22 years if necessary. We are also conscious that there are many other families in the same position as our own. The full truth of why many other families lost their loved ones is the very least that relatives and survivors are entitled to. Unless the British Queen is going to announce next week that she will instruct her government and her forces to open up their secret files and set the truth free, then I and my family see nothing to celebrate. Thank you.
My brother was John Downs. 28 years ago in August 1984, my brother was killed as he attended an anti-internment march, a rally just like this one today. He was there to protest against British injustice in Ireland. John died after he was struck in the chest by a plastic bullet fired at point-blank range by a member of Britain's police in Ireland, in full view of the world's media, who reported it as a police riot. My brother John had so much to live for. He was happily married to Brenda, and they both had a beautiful daughter, Claire. That British plastic bullet robbed Brenda, Claire, all our family of a happy future. Brenda's not able to be here today. The reason for that is very simple. Brenda has travelled to be with Claire to discuss with her the contents of a letter Brenda received a few days ago from the British government. That letter told Brenda that as far as the British state is concerned, John's death is closed. In other words, there will be no justice for John, for Brenda, for Claire, for my family. Plastic bullets are still being used in the 6 counties. Several hundred were fired last year. We have campaigned long and hard for them to be banned. There is talk that these weapons will soon be deployed on the streets of England against black and Islamic communities. Our response is that their use was wrong in Ireland, and their use will equally be wrong on the streets of Tottenham, Burnley and Birmingham. As I stand here today, I think of the 16 other families whose loved ones were murdered and maimed by plastic and rubber bullets fired by British police and British Army in the 6 counties. Families like those of Julie Livingstone and Caroline Kelly. These were wee girls, these were children. Like my family, none of those families have ever received justice from the British state. Perhaps the real harsh truth is that we will never receive justice while Britain remains in our country. And that is why I'm standing here today. Thank you.
According to recently discovered documents, the British government decided in 1972, that's 40 years ago, that in order to crush the struggle for freedom and democracy in Ireland, the British Army should not be inhibited in its campaign by the threat of court proceedings and should therefore be suitably indemnified. This damning indictment of Britain's behaviour in Ireland is hardly a surprise to us, but it illustrates just how immoral was the role of Her Majesty's armed forces in this country. As a Republican, I find the concept of monarch effacement, the basis that an unelected head of state can control as a mere accident of their birth, totally and utterly unacceptable. Meeting the British monarchy in the 6 counties acknowledges that they have the right to exercise their sovereignty in this part of Ireland. It is indeed very, very regrettable that Martin has taken this decision. I have many questions about the British Army behaviour, but today I'll ask only one. Why should we welcome to Ireland the person who is designated as the head of Britain's armed forces? Gormila Mayagov.